Hey everybody! Going to take a little time to go over the song lyrics that you had to read for last week's discussion. So if you remember, for the week 6 discussion, you looked at the song lyrics for Lose Yourself by Eminem. And in the discussion questions, I asked you first to talk about what the moment is that he's referring to in the lyrics, what we can figure out about the situation that he's referring to. And then I asked you to look for some elements of poetry in the lyrics. So I think I asked you to look for some imagery, some metaphors, and then to look at the rhyme, right? So we're going to go through that and talk about each one of those items. So first, what is the moment that he is referring to? Because in the intro, he says, look, if you had one shot or one opportunity to seize everything you ever wanted in one moment, would you capture it or just let it slip? So in that intro, we don't really get any specific information about what's happening, but there is a reference to a moment, right? If you had one shot, one opportunity to seize everything you ever wanted in one moment, right? So whatever this moment is, it's a pretty big deal, pretty significant. Your chance to get everything that you ever wanted, life-changing moment, right? Would you capture it or just let it slip? That is the crux of the song, right? What the whole song is pointing towards, that kind of moment. And then in the chorus, he comes back to this moment, you better lose yourself in the music, the moment, you own it, you better never let it go, you only get one shot, do not miss your chance to blow, this opportunity comes once in a lifetime. So the chorus takes that same moment from the intro, and we're now getting a sense that, it is a specific type of moment that he's referring to. You better lose yourself in the music, okay? You only get one shot, do not miss your chance to blow. So the chorus gives us a little more information, but it also reinforces what the intro kind of hinted at, which is that, it's a pretty big deal, this moment. Figuring out what the literal moment is that the song, that the lyrics themselves are referencing, we get that information in the first verse, right? So his palms are sweaty, knees weak, arms are heavy, there's vomit on his sweater already, mom's spaghetti. He's nervous, but on the surface he looks calm and ready to drop bombs. So, he's nervous, right? But on the surface, everything seems fine. Seems like he's ready to drop bombs. So we have a metaphor there, actually, because he's probably not literally dropping bombs. So what kind of bombs are we talking about? Okay. But he keeps on forgetting what he wrote down. So he's written something down, but he's not looking at what he wrote down because he's forgetting what he wrote down. The whole crowd goes so loud, he opens his mouth, but the words won't come out. He's choking, how everybody's joking now. The clock's run out, time's up, over, blow. So this moment has something to do with writing stuff down and then being in front of a crowd and trying to remember what you wrote down, and you keep forgetting it, and when you go to open your mouth, nothing comes out, and you're choking, not literally, figuratively. He can't do it. And now the crowd pretty much laughing at him, right? So we're getting a little closer to what this moment really is, has to, it's involving Well, we don't really know that it involves music just yet, because that comes from the chorus. So we know it's something where he's in front of a crowd, he's written something down, but he can't remember what he wrote, nothing's coming out, crowd's making fun of him, and then the clock runs out, time's up, over, blow. So whatever he was supposed to do in front of this crowd that he can't remember what he wrote down to say, he had a time limit for it, right? The clock's run out, time's up, over, blow. And then snap back to reality. Oh, there goes gravity. Oh, there goes rabbit. He choked. He's so mad, but he won't give up that easy. No, he won't have it. He knows his whole back's to these ropes. It's another indicator that's a pretty important moment. It don't matter. He's dope. He knows that. But he's broke. He's so stagnant. He knows when he goes back to this mobile home, that's when it's back to the lab again. Yo, this whole rhapsody, better go capture this moment and hope it don't pass it. So going back to the lab, it's not a literal lab. It's a reference to where one would go to create, where one would go to experiment, where one would go to practice some sort of very precise surgery, perhaps, or some sort of something very technical. And it's like a combination of all of those things. And if you know a little bit about, hip-hop and rap, then we know that the lab is where they're going to write and create and mix, right? So he is in a rap battle. And this first one that he tries, we can see does not go so well. But he's not going to give up. He's going back home and he's going to try again. He knows, it's not the only battle that, he knows there's another one. There'll be another moment, but he has to seize this moment as quickly as possible because you never know when the opportunity won't be there anymore. The rest of the song actually goes more into why he feels like this moment, he has to seize this moment right now. Even though, rap battles aren't going anywhere. But for him, this is like, he has to do it as soon as possible. That would figure out why in the rest of the song. But in that first verse, he's trying to battle. And it doesn't go so well the first time. And one of the reasons why I wanted to choose this song is to focus on that battle. Because we've been talking about poetry. We looked specifically at some traditional poetry in the first part of the quarter. And then in the discussions, of course, we've been looking at song lyrics and how songs and poetry are not the same. They are two separate entities. But song lyrics borrow so much from poetry that what they do share in common makes that link undeniable, even though they are different things. And this is actually a very interesting way that poetry and song lyrics are also connected. And it has to do with the fact that traditional poetry was a spoken word art form. It was meant to be heard, not necessarily read. Obviously that changed over centuries. And now, a lot of us do think of poetry as sort of a very insulating, personal, private thing, whether you're writing it or reading it. That it's not often something that is a public thing. And sure, there are some poets that, become famous and the general public has at least heard of them, right? But it's still seen as so much of a private thing, that we don't really think about the fact that originally poetry was meant to be shared orally, you know, it was meant to be heard. So, you know, come all the way back, you know, to the mostly present times, and in the 80s, 1980s, we saw just an explosion of hip-hop and rap music. And obviously, both genres have evolved, and there's different types of hip-hop, different types of rap music. But certainly the 80s is when they both really started to make their mark. And also, in the 1980s, is when something called slam poetry began. So it started in Chicago. This construction worker slash poet, I believe his name was Mark Kelly Smith, it started what became known as slam poetry. And it was just a group of people gathering in like a coffee shop or a bookstore or a park, wherever. And anyone who wanted to participate, it was kind of like open mic night for poets. But they would get up and they would recite their stuff. Except, it wasn't just an open mic night, you know. It was a competition. So there would be members of the audience who were responsible for scoring each poet after their performance. And there's some rules and stuff about how the scoring system works. I'm not really concerned about those details right now, but at the end of the evening, based on the scoring, whatever, there would be a winner. So it was like a poetry battle. And it is so very similar to a rap battle in a lot of ways. And especially the idea that the audience is such an active participant in the whole process. There are other similarities that we'll talk about next week. But I wanted to just, you know, introduce this idea of slam poetry versus battling with rap. And that, for as different as they are, there are some similarities. And then we have a song here that the whole catalyst for the lyrics is a battle, a rap battle, okay? And then the author not only is referencing a rap battle music, but is then also borrowing, using a whole lot of poetry in the lyrics. So he has, you know, created this sort of meshed version that we've been talking about in some ways over the last few weeks, which is that they are separate entities. However, music and poetry still share so much in common that they are just cosmically linked in a way. And so we know what the moment is now. And what's also great about this song, like some that we've looked at already, is that even though it references a very specific literal moment, so many of us can still relate to the underlying message. You know, I am clearly not a rapper. I am clearly not going to be participating in any kind of rap battle ever in my life. I mean, maybe as an audience member, but not as an actual person battling. But yet, the message behind these lyrics speaks to me. You know, whatever that moment might be for you, don't pass it up. Don't let it go. You have to seize that opportunity and make the absolute most out of it. So the moment is specific and literal, but it's also very vague and universal. And I think that's cool. Looking at the other questions that you were asked to answer has to do with the elements of poetry. So I asked you to look for some imagery. And I'm not going to say that the lyrics are overflowing with imagery, but there are moments of it. And those first two lines for sure. You know, his palms are sweaty, knees weak, arms are heavy, there's vomit on his sweater already, mom's spaghetti. I mean, that's probably the most iconic imagery in the lyrics. You know, he gives some auditory imagery. You know, the whole crowd goes so loud. The clock runs out, time's up, over, blow. He gives us an image of his home, you know, back to the mobile home. You know, in the second verse, you know, his soul's escaping through this hole that is gaping. I have a visual there. It only grows harder, only grows hotter. And then later down, you know, when he's talking, he goes home and barely knows his own daughter, but hold your nose, because here goes the cold water. And then another auditory one at the end of that second verse, you know, but the beat goes on, da-da-dum, da-dum. So there is some imagery in there. He is creating pictures for us in certain moments. You can visualize or imagine, you know, because it's not always visual. Sometimes it is, it's auditory, sometimes it's kinetic. But there's some things in there that we can close our eyes and imagine. As for the metaphors, you know, we've got actually a lot of metaphor and simile in here. You know, I already mentioned before, you know, if he looks calm and ready to drop bombs, you know, so it's not literal bombs, so that's clearly a metaphor for something, and it's the rap, the bars, where he says, oh, there goes gravity, you know, snap back to reality, oh, there goes gravity. He's not really weightless. But so a metaphor there. The lab is a metaphor. In the chorus, do not miss your chance to blow. That's a metaphor. You know, for him, it's again the rap. But I think even, you know, if you're just looking at any kind of standard pivotal moment, any opportunity, you know, do not miss your chance to blow. It's almost like explode in a way. His soul's escaping. That's not literal, so that's definitely a metaphor for something. Later on down in that second verse, he's cold product. He's not really a cold product. He's just, it's a metaphor. And when you get to the third verse, we've got, you know, I'm going to tear this mother effing roof off like two dogs' cage. So we've got a simile. When he says, I've been I've been chewed and spit up and booed off stage. So, metaphor there. Little on down in that one, you know, I'm like a snail. I've got to formulate a plot. I'm like a snail. And then this is a really interesting one at the end of that, that last verse where he says, you know, Mom, I love you, but this trailer's got to go. I cannot grow old in Salem's lot. It's more of an illusion than a metaphor, but it is a comparison, so it kind of is a metaphor. And if you know what Salem's Lot was, it was a book turned into a movie, Stephen King, and Salem's Lot is, they're all vampires. But it's a very, no one wants to be from Salem's Lot. No one wants to be in Salem's Lot. So, it's almost like he's surrounded by death or people that are just evil in some way or another. So that's where he feels like he currently is. So that's a very interesting metaphor there as well. The last question for the discussion was about identifying the rhyme. And this is probably one of my favorite things to do with Eminem's lyrics. Because the rhymes are ridiculous and unexpected. And I think that's what makes them so interesting. You know, if you go back up again to the first verse, you know, his palms are sweaty, knees weak, arms are heavy, there's vomit on his sweater already, mom's spaghetti, he's nervous but on the surface he looks calm and ready. Um, so you'll notice, like, there is some rhyme at the end of the lines, but that rhyme is also present in the middle of the lines. Um, and that, I think, is not an easy thing to accomplish and still have the words make sense. Um, but it's just a really cool way to incorporate the rhyme in an unexpected way. Um, in the next part, he keeps on forgetting what he wrote down. The whole crowd grows so loud. He opens his mouth, but the words won't come out. He's joking how, everybody's joking now. The clock runs out. Time's up, wow. It's a lot of, and it's not straight rhyme, but it's that middle rhyme where the vowel sounds are the same. Because there's actually a few different types of rhyme. I think the best, maybe not the best, but my favorite, two of my favorites, are down at the end in the last verse. Okay, so I've been chewed up and spit out and booed off stage, but I kept rhyming and stepped right in the next cipher. Best believe somebody's paying the Pied Piper. All the pain inside amplified by the fact that I can't get by with my 9 to 5, and I can't provide the right type of life for my family. I mean, the rhyme is crazy. And then it gets even more so midway through until the end. There's no Mackay Pfeiffer. This is my life, and these times are so hard, and it's getting even harder. Trying to feed and water my seed, plus teeter-totter. Caught up between being a father and a prima donna, baby mama drama, screaming on her. The rhyme is pretty crazy. But biggest reason that I wanted to have you guys look for the rhyme is because we've already looked at some traditional poetry, we've looked at a bunch of other song lyrics, and one thing that a lot of students will end up saying, in terms of what they've learned about poetry, is that poetry doesn't have to rhyme, because they always thought it did. And it doesn't have to rhyme, and there's plenty of spectacular poetry, famous, well-revered poetry that doesn't have a stitch of rhyme in it. There are other forms of poetry where the rhyme is an expectation. So, like, if you're writing some type of sonnet, if it's a specific type of sonnet, or, couplets and things like that, the rhyme should be there, because that's part of that form. But if you're doing just like free verse, free form poetry, none of it has to rhyme. Song lyrics often do, but they don't have to. And then some song lyrics, like this one, have a ton of rhyme, but not necessarily in the ways that you would expect the rhymes to appear. Because when M goes for a rhyme, he does not just look to place it at the end of each line. He will look to place it 50 times in like 5 lines of text. So it's pretty funny that it's not poetry, and yet we can find so much rhyme within it. But I think the best thing to take away from this little follow-up is, first, the connection between rap battling and slam poetry, and what that sort of says to us about the art form of hip-hop and rap, and that they are genres that often do not get the credit that they deserve. But that's not to say that every single hip-hop and rap artist is fantastic, because there's a lot of crap ones, just like there's a lot of crap artists in every other genre. And there are definitely some things that aren't so savory about certain artists and the kind of music they make, just like there is in every other genre. But overall, those two musical categories of hip hop and rap, they're often seen as not having any value at all. And I don't think anything could be further from the truth. And next week, we're going to look at someone who tests those boundaries even more than M does, in terms of the balance between poet and rapper. So M is pretty good at it, but next week we're gonna take a look at Tupac, and then the week after that we're gonna take another look at Tupac. So we're gonna look, and we're gonna see, and we're gonna learn how the poetry and the rap and music in general are way more connected than many of us probably even really thought. So, if you have any questions or anything else to say about Lose Yourself, you can certainly do that as you're answering the journal for this week. I'm always here, though, if you would like to contact me in addition to that. And the last thing I'll leave you with is, don't listen to what M is saying. Listen to what M is saying in these lyrics, because regardless of what genre of music it is, whether it's poetry or not, the advice he's given in here, the message that he's giving, something we should all probably take to heart. Don't let those opportunities pass you by. Seize the day and make the most out of it.